Hello, Scream Demons, and welcome to the Screams from the Basement podcast with Sam and Casey. I am one of your creepy co-hosts. I am Casey.
I'm Sam the Damned, and let's get screaming.
Let's get screaming as we are joined in the basement on this episode by author of Not Another Sarah Halls and Take Your Turn, Teddy, Haley Newlin, as we discuss her latest novel set for release this month on October 14th, the film you are about to see.
The film you are about to see is set against the backdrop of a 1950s drive-in movie theater during an all-night spectacular featuring many works of William Castle and Vincent Price. But when the horror becomes real, a group of teens have to stop an ancient evil and save their town from destruction. Please join us in giving a very warm welcome to author Haley Newlin. Haley, thanks for joining Screams from the Basement.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing this book, which Casey and I, we both read. We both enjoyed a lot. It is a surprisingly poignant book that we both kind of got a little misty-eyed by the end of it. But it also has a ton of gore and gnarly stuff and fun, like, drive-in horror kind of things. What is the film you're about to see? And how did this nugget of an idea turn into a full-fledged novel?
Yeah, well, thank you. First off, thank you so much for reading the book. It's always so fun to go onto podcasts where the hosts have actually read it, because I feel like the conversation can be a little bit more in depth. So thank you so much. And the film you're about to see really kind of just came from my earliest memories of horror, which started with, those Turner classic movies, stumbling on The Tingler, which I talk about a little bit in the introduction of the film you are about to see. And basically, I just remember learning about all of the gimmicks that William Castle brought to the theater experience. And so one that he was most well known for was called Percepto. And that was where he put vibrating devices underneath theater seats and would trigger them, when the Tingler came on screen, and it would create this vibrating sensation, and viewers would actually feel like, that spine tingle, almost like the tingler was on their backs. And I just remember thinking, okay, when I say horror, people always think scary. And I've done some creepy books. Take Your Turn, Teddy was very creepy. I've done another slasher before this, and I thought, I want to have some fun. And so I tried to think about, what was really fun for me, and not just gimmick horror, but also how I watched it. And a lot of times that was at a drive-in theater. And my drive-in in Indiana is just like so far out into the cornfields, and you have to drive past like tons of corn, just farms and stuff to get there. And it's just very atmospheric. And so that is the actual setting I used in the film you are about to see. And basically it takes place in the 1950s, where I think drive-in horror was at its peak. Mm-hmm. And the drive-in host a Dusk Till Dawn spooktacular. And what's really cool about that is, so while I have my own kind of horror story going on, there's all these oldies horror films that I love on the screen. And they kind of become part of the plot as well, even if it's just like in passing, or, you're trying to decide if this scream actually came from the drive-in, or is it the screams that William Castle is telling everybody to do during the Tingler. And so it was really cool to me to just bring kind of like those fun, gimmicky ideas into a horror story that still wasn't afraid to be modernized and meet the expectations that horror fans expect. They expect good kills, good creative kills. They expect, those things that weren't quite ready or weren't quite necessarily all the way there in the 50s, like the gore, for instance. And I also liked this idea of, if I bring like a slasher vibe to this story, then it's something that the characters who are in 1950s haven't seen in their own horror movies before. They haven't seen a psycho killer yet. That doesn't quite come along until like the 60s and 70s. And so I loved capturing the 50s and then bringing elements from modern and other eras of horror to the actual story itself. It was a really long-winded answer, but there you have it.
No, that's amazing.
I love that, because you set up this time frame where we're expecting something like a Vincent Price, William Castle movie, and it turns into a full-fledged slasher as you go along with it. But you open the novel telling like your personal history with Vincent Price. It tells this story about your youth when you first discovered Vincent Price. And so the question I have for you is, what did he mean to you in those formative years? And then how has how has adult Haley looked at Vincent Price and used that to inform your writing?
Yeah, I appreciate that question. It's so good. So I'm an identical twin, which I mentioned in my introduction in the film you're about to see. And I was kind of labeled as like the quiet one, the shy one, and it wasn't necessarily that I was especially shy or quiet. I just happened to be more so than my twin sister. You know, there was an immediate comparison. And so I watched these oldies horror movies, and especially someone like Vincent Price, and where you just don't detect any kind of doubt. You don't like, he is so aware of what he is doing. He is so, you know, this is kind of the villainy that I bring. There's always this huge performance, and I guess I was just really kind of starstruck by the way he seemed to always kind of take up the room, whatever room he was in. Even if it was him kind of talking on a couch, you know, with a television host or whatever, he just always was so certain that this is who he was, that everything he did was going to be to this effect and to kind of create this persona. And so I think in a time when I was trying to figure out who I was because I was constantly being compared to someone else, I just really appreciated this identity that came forward and wasn't afraid to be goofy and wasn't afraid to demand everybody's attention. And that's what Vincent Price meant to me growing up as somebody, you know, like I said, somebody feeling a little bit shy. And then he introduced me to Elvira, who once again just kind of demands you to be seen and is so, this is who I am. And so I really loved that in horror, where it kind of took away this, you know, modern day we would call it cringiness, you know, and these people weren't afraid to be cringe. In fact, that's what they made their, you know, their life's work of. You know, I'm going to make this kind of awkward, I'm going to make this kind of goofy, I'm going to make this silly, and, you know, this is going to be kind of a, you know, innuendo. And so I think that was what initially really struck me about them. And then me sitting here right now, I think I didn't realize, I hope this sounds more interesting than sad. I didn't realize what a friend Vincent Price felt like to me. Like, I would spend weekends watching all these Vincent Price movies. I went through and I watched like different conversations he did, these stories he told about being compared to or being confused for Christopher Lee or Boris Karloff and just things like that. And I just felt like I knew him almost in like a granddaughter, grandfather kind of way, because my own grandfather, he showed me the Beatles and he's very goofy and he's very like story oriented, and so I saw those qualities in Vincent Price. And so I guess sitting here now, he just feels like someone who has always been in my life, and so there's like a familiarity and a comfort that almost feels like a friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Because we all have that, whether people want to admit it or not. And a lot of people, like, for some reason nowadays frown on like idolizing celebrities in these ways, but we do. We all have these people that we just
look
like
up
you said,
to,
we grow up with and look up to. Yeah.
And if that gets you through the day, you know, like I think and that was another thing when I was writing this book. I think we can all like speak to, you know, the world's what it is right now. And so there was a part of me that was like, is this inappropriate? Like, is this not a time to bring forward this era that was goofy and just silly? And, you know, I'm talking about these 1950s cars and car culture and, you know, skeletons flying through the air. And I was just kind of like, I had that moment where I thought, is this a little self-indulgent? Is this a little this or that? And then I thought, I was craving fun. And so I knew that meant horror fans were too. And how many times do we, like, when we were having a bad day, and that was another thing, like, my writing career started with Vincent Price. You know, I was told by a professor who I idolized that I was a really good writer, but I wouldn't make it writing junk, and junk being horror. And so I almost stopped writing like that. It was so upsetting to me. I almost stopped writing. And then I went home and I turned on 1953 House of Wax, starring Vincent Price. And there was just all of that fun that I remember having with him. And I thought, if this can turn my day around, if this can turn my like perception around that quickly, this is what I need to be doing. This is where I want to be. And so I just kind of wanted to bring that comfort and that hilarity and that goofiness to my readers who would kind of let me take them on this journey through me kind of fangirling, but also trying to tell a story about why this era at times could be really awesome.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's such a great answer. And I feel like, I mean, as horror fans, we like all kinds of horror, but there is just something about like fun horror that I
Yeah.
always come back to. Like horror should be fun sometimes. And you do a good job of incorporating like kind of modern tendencies into this while also appreciating the era it's in. Like crafting the character of June, it's been like opined that people that like horror fans are particularly empathetic. Like to
Right.
enjoy horror, you have to be empathetic. And June essentially like with the powers that she has almost has like something somewhat like super empathy, right?
Yeah.
What was the like process for creating June and giving her this like this sixth sense of a kind?
Yeah.
Where did that
Um,
come in?
well, first of all, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. I June's character was, you know, every writing class you take or whatever, they try to tell you like don't put yourself in your books. Like your character should not be you, right? Okay, well, June June might have a couple of my qualities. So I talked about being compared to my twin sister, and one thing that comes up a lot is that I'm the sensitive one. And as I've gotten kind of, I'm in my later 20s, and as I've gotten there, I've realized, am I too sensitive, or are some people not sensitive enough? And so that was kind of something I found that happens so often in horror, especially when, the person who's saying there's a ghost, there's a demon. When it's a woman, then that sympathy or that empathy really kind of fades. It's she's crazy, she's this or that. And so I wanted to not only create a character that had this empathy that sometimes felt way too much and it's detrimental and it ruins her day, it ruins her night, it ruins, her sense of the world. She starts to see like violence and death and things like that, and the not so fun sides of horror, right? And so I wanted to create a character that navigates through those feelings, but wanted to actually give her, even in the 1950s, wanted to give her this little group of people who were understanding, who saw this empathy and this kind of like as a superpower, even if they didn't quite fully understand what it was. They liked that was what made June who she was. And so I think there was something really powerful in using the horror genre to create this character who's empathetic, and they end up being the hero.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you mentioned combining the two big eras really of horror, 50s horror with the fun horror movies, and then the 70s 80s slasher movies.
Right.
Obviously Vincent Price, William Castle, big influence on 50s horror for you. What are some of those 80s movies that maybe you looked at for the updated slasher aspects of this?
Yeah, so I think honestly a lot of my slasher inspiration might have come, and some fans might disagree with me a little bit. Horror fans, I mean. I tend to lean a little bit more towards 70s slashers versus 80s
Mm,
slashers. And I
yeah.
don't know if it's maybe something about being born in the 90s, but as I was kind of going through the horror channel, I found myself kind of skipping over 80s and 90s a little bit. And I know that's going to make some people cringe so bad. I promise I'm catching up. But I did a podcast and they talked about 90s horror, and I was so lost. I'm so lost. But 70s horror, I really I love Halloween. And I think Halloween was really probably the key inspiration to turn this into a slasher. I also was reading Breathe In, Bleed Out by Brian McCulley. Have you guys heard of that one?
I've heard of it.
Um,
I haven't read it. Yeah.
it's a phenomenal slasher book. You have to check it out. But I was reading a very early copy of that, and I kept thinking, okay, when I talk about horror, I like to look at it a decade at a time. And I know that's kind of nerdy and studious, but I do. Like if I watch House of Wax 1953, the movies I watch for the rest of the week are going to be in the 50s. And I just kind of like looking at them like that to see kind of what the evolution was. And so for me, we get the 60s and you have Night of the Living Dead and a Vincent Price movie I love, Diary of a Madman. And it's like, there's kind of this supernatural element, there's these monster qualities that kind of shift over from the 50s into the 60s. And then by the time you get to the 70s, we're dropping bodies. Like, bodies are going down. We expect a body count. And so I think it was really the 70s slashers that kind of inspired me. But I guess that's what I wanted this book to be. Is I even mentioned some 40s kind of noir stuff. We have Cat People and Vincent in Shock starring Vincent Price, his first starring role. And so I really kind of hope to take readers through the eras a little bit. And maybe we kind of cut off 70s transitioning into 80s, but maybe that's another book, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you going back to the 50s influences of this, where you're talking about in this book specifically about these movies that relied on gimmicks to get teens into theaters. Do you have any favorite gimmick from one of those movies? And
that
why...
is such a good question. Sorry.
Yeah. And to follow that up, why do you think that that's gone away or changed, I guess, in the movie-going experience?
That's you guys are so great. This is such a great conversation. Sorry, I'm just like, I'm so happy you guys are asking such great questions. So behind me, I have a blackboard wall, and I actually outlined William Castle's gimmicks and decided which ones to use. And so there's one in particular that is that like really
No, I love that.
No, that's amazing.
I have a little checklist like, okay, we use that one now. And so there's one that actually wasn't in any William Castle movies until the 60s, and so I did borrow a 60s gimmick. And that's another thing for listeners, if you don't know, I actually employ William Castle's gimmicks like in the plot of the novel. Mm-hmm. But I think my favorite gimmick is one that's a little less talked about, and it's called the fright break. And that was in the 1960s, and it was basically when William Castle or the theater would pause the movie, and William Castle or somebody would come out and say, okay, now we understand this movie is so terrifying, it's so disturbing, so unsettling. If some of you need to leave, there you go, walk right there. And sometimes they would even light up like the path, like to get out, but just like that singular path, like so everybody could watch you leave. And that was called the fright break. And then some people would actually get up and take the break and be like, yeah, this movie's too much, like William Castle's crazy, whatever. And then he would start to say, now those people are taking the coward's corner and like encourage the audience to kind of laugh at them. And so I think that's hilarious and so like juvenile, which is William Castle. I honestly think as he got older, he was like, I'm going to have a lot of fun with this. I'm going to embarrass these people a little bit. And so I think that's the reason I like the fright break so much is because we still kind of do that. When we get introduced into horror, we pause it and we're like, everybody good? Like, do you guys remember watching movies when you were really young and you'd pause it and be like, okay, everybody okay here? Like, for me, that was Scream. That was my early introduction for Scream. And so, what's her name? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking her name. But the garage scene in the first Scream movie. Yes, Tatum. I almost said Torrance. Let's bring it on. Totally different vibe. But when
Still
that happened,
a great movie though. Yeah.
Right. Still cinematic brilliance. But we paused that movie and we were like, okay, is everybody good? And I remember my twin sister was like, no, like I'm going to bed. I'm done with this. And we were all kind of like, you're so lame. And so in our own way, we still kind of employ the fright break. And so I really liked that William Castle made a big show out of that. He was so theatrical and he didn't not care if he was embarrassing people, putting them on the spot or whatever. And I think that is what makes that era so special is there's such a connection between the audience and the filmmakers, even if the filmmakers aren't in the room. It was just so connected. And I think that we've kind of gotten away from that. I don't know necessarily if it's... I don't know. I'm going to be like a hippie here and be like, it's capitalism. But it's like, it is really difficult to kind of, I guess, track like why we took maybe that fun away a little bit. And maybe it was just things started to feel more commercial over time, and people were less willing to invest in these little gimmicks that might work, might not work. It was really just about getting people into the theater. And for William Castle, it was so much about having fun. And of course he wanted a full theater, but I guess I kind of think that maybe eventually numbers, box office numbers might have started to matter a bit more, and people were putting less effort into the theatrics like Vincent Price.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because like many people don't think of it this way, but 3D is obviously a gimmick to get people to watch movies in the third dimension in 3D. And we had that big phase right after Avatar where everything was in 3D. Like I saw comedies in 3D. It's like, why? But but now we don't have that really anymore. It just doesn't exist anymore. And I kind of miss that. Even if it wasn't necessary, it was something about putting on those 3D glasses and watching something in 3D.
And some movies had the smell-o-vision too. Do you guys remember that? Yeah. So I guess to your point, like so they still exist. They're still there. It's like I don't know what we have to do as audience members to tell them we want it back. But I mean I guess we have like the 4D, you know, like the shaking seats and stuff. And I love that. Like I saw one of the sorry, you guys, I'm not a huge, like, I like the earlier Star Wars movies versus the newer ones, but when I saw, I think it was Rogue One, when I saw that one, we got the whole thing, and, you know, we had, like, the vibrating seats, and I could not focus on that movie, because the whole time I'm like, this is William Castle, this is the Tingler, like...
Yeah, those theaters need to incorporate some of those older movies into... 4D now. Yeah,
like put us in those seats now and play the Tingler. Like, it'd be amazing.
Yeah, I would love to see something like Jaws in 4D. You know,
yes.
How much more terrifying would Jaws be if you kept getting sprayed with water during it? Like,
that's amazing.
No, smell-o-vision. I'm so glad you brought smell-o-vision up. I am a scratch and sniff fanatic, and it is because I grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s. Allow me to nerd out for a minute here. When Rugrats Go Wild came out, the Rugrats Wild Thornberrys finally meeting, that was like my first cinematic event that I remember.
Yes.
And I remember getting a scratch and sniff card to bring to the theater to watch it. And like little numbers would pop up in the corner of the screen and you'd scratch and sniff, and like it was all gross things like dirty diapers or Phil's feet or something like that. But oh my god, like I loved it. I was like, this is the best thing ever, and I wish more movies had scratch and sniff cards.
And maybe we could make the smells a little better. I mean, I guess
maybe
because like we're talking about the fun gimmicks and which was our favorite, and I guess. Sorry, Sam. My least favorite was probably the smell-o-vision. And to me, it was because I love the smell of popcorn. Like, you know, when I say that I put myself into my character June, one of the big things is I do not watch a movie without popcorn. Like, to me, that's like, what are you doing? You know, you got to make it a full experience. And I try to do that every time I watch a movie, because then I feel like I can really suspend my disbelief a little bit more, really appreciate things. And I think that when I take the time to, you know, I'll get my fireplace on and I'll light a candle and I'll have my popcorn, I think I'm able to find something I like in a lot of movies that maybe I wouldn't have seen myself liking before. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. We are both popcorn fiends. Like you can't go to the movies without popcorn.
No, I work at a movie theater, and I don't even think a shift goes by where I don't grab a bag of popcorn behind the counter. Like,
right. I used to work like concession stands in high school. I'd just kind of be like, you know, just a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
So the film you're about to see takes place entirely at the drive-in, and you've talked about going to the drive-in before. What are maybe some of your favorites, like drive-in memories or favorite movies that you've ever seen at the drive-in? Another thing that's kind of like gone away and it's kind of making a comeback now, but what for you are some favorites like drive-in movies or memories?
Yeah, so I definitely think a lot of the movies I included on the marquee in the film you are about to see are movies that I have either seen at a drive-in or I thought, why haven't we shown this at a drive-in? Like, why isn't this part of a horror movie night? A lot of the horror movies I saw at drive-ins were the Universal Monster movies, which some people will read this book and be like, she doesn't show a single Universal Monster movie. Like, where's Dracula? Like, where are these people? And to me, it was just like, those movies are fantastic. Love them. But they get enough attention. They're well known. You know, they're good. Like, I have had people read this book, and it's not even out yet, and I can probably think of at least 5 people who have gone and watched The Tingler and told me how much they loved it. And so I guess just anytime I saw Vincent Price at a drive-in, that was pretty cool. I like mad respect to my local drive-in for showing oldies horror movies. But I think like a particular fun moment for me was when I saw The Blob at the drive-in. I might have been like
Oh
14 or
yeah.
15, and that was
Hell
my
yeah.
first time seeing The Blob.
Like the
And
original 50s one you're talking.
original
Yeah,
50s,
yeah.
yes, yeah. And so, my parents are hyping it up. This movie was really scary. I was afraid the blob was going to come up out of the bathtub or whatever, and which is hilarious. And so I'm like gearing up, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be a scary movie. And then it's that like doo-woppy like song like "Beware of the Blob,"
Yep.
in the beginning, and I just cracked up, and I thought it was so funny. And so some people asked me, why is the blob included with like this list of Vincent Price movies? And that was it to me. Just that little song, that little introduction, to me that like totally captured kind of the fun you have at the drive-in, even if you see a movie that at the time was considered scary. It was terrifying. The blob filled up the theater and people were running out of it. And that's another thing. You have to remember that even though these movies were fun, they were still kind of stepping outside of what people had seen in horror, or what people were used to, or some people who were still getting into horror. Like, my grandfather told me that when he took my grandmother to see House of Wax with Vincent Price, she was mortified. It was the scariest thing she had ever seen. She could not believe that people were taking bodies from the morgue. She was a nurse, and she was, so mortified. And back then, like, the hospital had more, I mean, they still do, but, the morgue was in the hospital, and my grandfather worked down there, and she got to the point where she didn't want to go down there because she thought somebody was going to be coming in and body snatching, and she didn't want to see too much. And and so I think that that's also really fun when you sit down, like I said, and you try to set the scene for watching these movies, is to try to remember that, yes, they're fun. Yes, there's stuff that's hilarious now. Like, you can see the wire as they're pulling the tingler around the room and stuff. But at the time, this was considered somewhat scary. Some people were like, ha ha ha, yeah, this is really funny. And then in their head, they're like, that was kind of scary, which again, we still have today. And so I really like that. I guess what I love so much about these oldies horror movies is they take you through that full range. And I love movies that maybe they kind of have your heart for a second. And you're like, oh man, that was a hit, or man, I really felt something. And then the next moment you're cracking up, and then you're falling for a jump scare, and then you're really stressed for the character. And I guess I just kind of like going through that whole range of emotion.
Yeah. I think this book takes you on that whole range of emotion, honestly. Like, it's so you nailed that. You really did. Like,
Thank you.
Yeah. It's fantastic. I do have one quick follow-up question. Because we're talking about the 58 Blob. Have you seen the 1972 sequel?
I have
Beware
not.
the Blob.
Is it worth it? Is it worth the watch?
It's terrible, but you should totally watch it.
Okay, all right. You know what? Honestly, you had me at it's terrible.
Yeah.
I'm like, I am totally one of those people who are like, oh man, I went and saw that movie. It was so bad. I'm like, how bad are we talking?
Yep, it's pretty bad. It's borderline like. I don't know. I'm gonna
watch
really
it for
bad.
You, Sam. Is it like The Wicker Man? When we bring in Nicolas Cage and people who are real fans of the first one are like, "What is happening?" You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I don't know if I think this is my hot take. I think the remake of The Wicker Man is better than Beware the Blob.
Really, Sam? I have never met anybody who has said that before. No, I'm here for it.
I thought you were about to say better than the original Wicker Man, and I was about to just stop our show forever.
No.
No.
But Beware the
like,
Blob
I'm out of here.
Yeah.
Beware the Blob is pretty terrible. The credits roll over like 5 minutes of you're just watching a kitten prance around in an open field. Oh. That's like the opening credits, and it really has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. Like, that's the kind of bad I'm talking.
Do they, is there that strong introduction, like that song? Do we have the upbeat song in the beginning?
No, it's like the most generic, like, we maybe have a temp track going over this kind of music. It's crazy. Like, it feels like they had maybe $20 to make the movie. But it's, all right,
I'm sold.
It's yeah.
I will check it out for you, Sam.
Worth a watch if you're into bad horror history. So
I am.
Oh, amazing.
All right. Well, are we ready to get to our big question here at the end?
Yes, I think so. I'm very interested to hear the answer to this.
Yeah, this is like the perfect question to end this on, because we've been talking about the drive-in and Vincent Price movie. So the question we leave all our interviews off with is, if you're going to program a double feature at a drive-in, but you have to feature two Vincent Price movies back to back, what two movies are you going to pick?
Oh my goodness. You guys ask such great questions.
Well, thank you.
You really do. Like, I'm just like, oh my goodness. Okay. So it would be impossible for me not to say The Tingler. And I'm sorry. I'm sure that you expected that. You had that coming. But to me, if someone said, what is the perfect drive-in horror movie, it's The Tingler. It's The Tingler for me. It has, the audience involvement. Like, even though you're in the car, it's like encouraging you to scream and stuff, and I think that's fantastic. So The Tingler for sure. Looking at my marquee I have written down. You guys got me. Okay. All right. In the spirit of gimmicks, I'm gonna say The Tingler and House on Haunted Hill. Because those are the great gimmicks, in my opinion, from William Castle. The gimmick in House on Haunted Hill, for those of you who don't know, was called Emergo, and that was where a skeleton would appear in the theater and just fly over the heads of the audience. And there's so many cool little skeleton oddities, gimmicks, and okay, we'll use that to explain this plot point kind of moments. And I just think House on Haunted Hill is a lot of fun. The first time I watched it, I was trying to follow the plot way too closely. So this is not a for the plot movie.
No, it's a for the vibes movie, for
it's
sure.
For the vibes, exactly.
Yeah. I love House on Haunted Hill.
Same. That's my favorite Vincent Price movie. I love that.
I love it too, and I think that one was my favorite for a long time until I saw The Tingler. So I think am I getting this backwards? But I will say there is one Vincent Price movie that I didn't include on the marquee, and it killed me to do it. But that movie takes place in 1963, or the movie came out in 1963. The drive-in, cut off at 1959. And so that is Diary of a Madman. Have you guys seen that one?
I have not seen that one yet.
I've not either.
No.
Okay, so I wish I could show you, but I have on a sweatshirt. I have a Vincent Price portrait tattoo. And it is from a scene in that movie. Vincent Price is possessed by an entity called the Horla. And he gets this almost like Morticia Addams light over his eyes, but it's this bright neon green. And so I think it is actually my favorite Vincent Price movie, even ahead of The Tingler. So
okay.
Yeah, it might become a thing where you have to buy it on DVD, but just once in your lifetime, remember me and watch Diary of a Madman. I promise you will have so much fun.
100% gonna hunt that down. That sounds awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. I love when guests give us movie recommendations.
Yes,
that's
exactly.
100% going up the watch list. I could always, especially in October, I can always use some more Vincent Price.
Mm-hmm.
And it has that cool Vincent Price, as he's an artist too, kind of like House of Wax, and so he's that menacing artist vibe that you've seen before, but it's fantastic. And I'm blanking on the actress's name, but there's a character named Odette, and I think the actress does such a good job with her character too. So it's just a really cool, fancy Vincent Price, classic velvet little blazers vibe with perfect mustache, perfect Vincent Price mustache.
I love that.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, we are both that's gonna get watched by the end of the month. It's
you
just
have to tell me what you think. You have to.
We'll do.
We'll do. You tell us what you think of Beware the Blob, and
I will.
We'll tell you what you think of Diary of a Madman.
Does that mean I have to watch Beware the Blob?
You do have to watch Beware. I've been meaning to get you to watch that forever now.
I still have never seen the original Blob.
Okay, start there. There. In my opinion, start there, and then you're clearly sounds like going to be let down. Let down by the following. But
then you watch the 80s one and it gets better again. So
yeah.
See, I haven't seen any of those. I've only seen the 50s.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, the 80s one is really good. It's very different than the 50s one.
Yeah.
But the 80s one is one of my favorite It's one of my favorite remakes.
Yeah.
In that glut of like the 80s movies where they were like, we're remaking all the 50s movies that we
Like
loved
The
growing
Fly?
up. Like
Yeah.
The Fly, The Thing, all
Yes.
of those.
There's really not a bad one.
No,
Yeah.
there's
They're
really
all
not
great.
a bad one. Yeah.
I need to go through the 80s because I'm always like that person in the group when we're talking about film and they're saying The Fly and I'm thinking Vincent Price and they're
Yeah.
thinking Jeff
Yeah.
Goldblum, or I say House of Wax and I'm thinking Vincent Price and they're thinking Paris Hilton.
Right.
So sometimes people are like, Haley, how haven't you seen these remakes? And I'm like, like the 50s. Watch the classics. Have you guys ever seen Cars? I'm like the Volkswagen band that's like, respect the classics.
Yes, 100%.
That's
I
me.
love that. That's been me for most of my life. Most of my friends growing up didn't watch anything past like 1999, and so
Right.
I was like showing them all these 70s and 80s movies, and they're like, "What are you doing? Why are
So
you showing this
old.
to us?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Imagine like slumber parties. And I'm like, guys, this movie, Cat People, came out in the 1940s, but hear me out. Hear me out. Yeah, and I threw in Cat People too because I just think the use of shadows in that movie
Yeah.
is pretty brilliant, and so that was just a little tidbit. That's why Cat People is in there.
Yeah, I did love that. Like your all-nighter it had a theme, but it also had a few oddballs in
It
there.
did
and
have
I
some
like
It
oddballs.
made
that.
me
Yeah.
jealous of the characters of I wasn't at the drive-in that night.
Yeah, at
And
least
see-
until about the third
Until something
movie
happens,
when
yeah.
Yeah.
shit hits the fan. But yeah,
Yeah. Then you're kind of like, good thing I missed that one.
yeah,
Yeah.
But that was honestly the key thing that made me want to write this book is I just kept thinking if I got to host like my friends at a drive-in, sorry, not my friends. If I got to host horror fans like you all, and if I got to host all of you guys at a drive-in, what would I show you? And that's basically where the story or where the idea for this book came, is just me imagining that I got to create my own little house of horror for a night, and that's what I came up with.
it's amazing. Yeah. Well, if you ever actually program that at a real drive-in, let us know because we'll road trip out to Indiana to see it.
Absolutely.
I think it has to be Indiana, and there are some far fancier than the one I attend. But I will say that in the simplicity of what you like about drive-ins, it's there. And the setting that I have in the book, that is the setting of the drive-in I grew up in. It is surrounded entirely by trees and cornfields, and it makes for a pretty spooky setting.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Well, Haley, if people want to join you in the drive-in, where can they pick up the novel when it comes out later this month?
It will be available on Amazon, Goodreads. You can also order directly from the publisher, and they have merch too, which is Mad Axe Media.
Oh shit! Okay, there's some merch going on with this too.
Yeah, and the t-shirts aren't just the book cover. It's a whole like the creature tingler kind of inspiration. So definitely
Hell
check it out.
yeah.
It's got the hearse too.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that. That's cool. Well, Haley, thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing this book with us. Like we've said, Casey and I both loved it, and we hope everybody goes and checks it out when it comes out on the 14th.
Thank you so much.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.